This Orzhov deck is an aristocrat combo build with a primary win condition of life-draining opponents. Thanks to its rule-bending text, this deck contains dozens of Shadowborn Apostles, which will act as the fuel to our aristocratic engine. With various ways to sacrifice the Apostles, including utilizing their built-in self-sacrifice ability, and numerous manners in which to get them into our hand and or the battlefield, our opponent's life totals will become taxed through incidental life drain and dedicated life drain spells. This will create difficult choices for our opponents, as each apostle that hits the graveyard will cost an opponent 3 life to keep it there. Failure to do so will result in the engine moving us closer and closer to ending the game, with some of Magic's most powerful demons tutoring for the missing pieces of our aristocratic engine. It's only a matter of time before the table succumbs. Thank you for choosing MTG Burgeoning for your Magic the Gathering content. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video and consider becoming a subscriber. Doing so supports the channel and makes you eligible for our various subscriber rewards series. If you would like to support the channel further, then click the link to our Patreon page in the description below. There you can join our ongoing Pack Wars series as a 1-month supporter or ongoing member. Or try joining Pack Wars for free by commenting on every MTG Burgeoning video in a month. We strive to offer creative rewards through our various Patreon tiers. So if Pack Wars isn't for you, then something else will be. Links to our content and various subscriber rewards series can be found in the description below. Send us an email, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram. We are your channel for all things Magic.
Welcome to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic. Athreos, God of Passage, is a 5/4 indestructible legendary enchantment creature god for 1 in Orzhov colors. As long as our devotion to Orzhov is less than 7, Athreos is not a creature. Whenever another creature we own dies, we return it to our hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. In the following deck tech, we are going to showcase how this commander synergizes and interacts in a deck that's filled with Shadowborn Apostles. Shadowborn Apostle is a 1/1 human cleric for 1 black mana. A deck can have any number of cards named Shadowborn Apostle. This is how we are able to include more than 1 copy in the EDH format, which is a singleton format, outside of basic lands, of course. We may also pay a black mana to sacrifice 6 Shadowborn Apostles and search our library for a demon creature card and put it onto the battlefield. Although there is a suite of demons in the 99 of this deck, the overall theme and vision of this deck is surrounded around the Shadowborn Apostle interaction with Athreos, God of Passage, and in so doing, the number of Shadowborn Apostles that are included in the 99 of this build, there are 28 of them. So our plan is going to be get these apostles onto the battlefield in any number of ways possible. Utilize Athreos' ability to get these creatures back into our hand by targeting an opponent for 3 life each time they want to keep those creatures in the graveyard. And whenever there is an opponent that barely has enough life to survive to do that, that's when we know that either we're going to knock that opponent out or that opponent is going to knock out every other opponent. Now, after many years of playing and sculpting and crafting the 99 of this build, for me, historically, 28 Shadowborn Apostles is the right number. You do not want too few so that you don't draw them or enable the ripple effect of Thrumming Stone, a card that we'll see later on in this deck tech, but you don't want too many that all you are doing are playing Shadowborn Apostles. You have to have a few other features in the 99 of the deck, or all you're really running is just 60 1/1 creatures. The following cards are ways we can get the Shadowborn Apostles into play. The first is Edgewalker, a 2/2 cleric for 1 in Orzhov colors. Cleric spells we play cost a white and black less to play. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana we play, as we slowly shift Edgewalker towards Jason Tamio so that we can reveal that the Shadowborn Apostle is in fact a human cleric. So with Edgewalker in play, Shadowborn Apostle is free to cast. Another way to get them into play is with the enchantment Remembrance. 3 and a white. Whenever a non-token creature we control is put into a graveyard, we may search our library for a copy of that creature card. If we do, we reveal the card and we put it into our hand. So when a Shadowborn Apostle dies, we search our library and put another Shadowborn Apostle into our hand and hopefully into play free if we also have Edgewalker on our side of the battlefield. Even better yet, when that Shadowborn Apostle does die, let's return it to the battlefield with Luminous Broodmoth, a 3/4 flying insect for 2 and 2 white. Whenever a creature we control without flying dies, we return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter on it. So as long as that Apostle that's hitting the graveyard doesn't already have a flying counter on it, Luminous Broodmoth will bring it back. The synergies between this and Remembrance are very, very powerful because we continue to populate the board with Shadowborn Apostles and get them into our hand. Here is the aforementioned Thrumming Stone, a legendary artifact that costs 5 and gives spells we control Ripple 4. Ripple 4 means whenever we play a spell, we may reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We may play any revealed cards with the same name as the spell without having to pay their mana costs. We put the rest on the bottom of our library. So with Thrumming Stone in play, if we cast a Shadowborn Apostle, we look at the top 4 cards of our library, and any Shadowborn Apostles that are there, they get to go into play for free, and then we continue rippling down our library until we have enough Shadowborn Apostles on our side of the battlefield in order to close out the game. Next, at instant speed, we have Rally the Ancestors. X and 2 white, we return each creature card with converted mana cost X or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, and then we exile those creatures at the beginning of our next end step, and we exile Rally the Ancestors. We have some room, there's a little bit of space to kind of exploit what Rally the Ancestors does. For just the investment of 3 overall mana, we can return every Shadowborn Apostle from our graveyard to our side of the battlefield. Yes, they are exiled at the beginning of our next end step. However, if we are able to sacrifice them before that happens and get them back into the graveyard, then we won't lose the Shadowborn Apostles to the exiling effect. This is a way in which we can keep our Shadowborn Apostles from going into play, back to the graveyard, into play, back to the graveyard, which will help us to fuel the many of our win conditions that are going to be presented later on in this deck tech. And the last card for this subsection of the video, it is Immortal Servitude. It is a sorcery for X and any 3 combination of Orzhov colors. We return each creature card with converted mana cost X from our graveyard to the battlefield. No limitations, no restrictions, nothing having to do with exiling, similar to Rally the Ancestors. We just float in 1 mana for X and 3 Orzhov colors, and all of our Apostles come right back from our graveyard to our side of the battlefield, ready to be sacrificed once again. Earlier in this deck tech, we talked about having a small suite of demons as a way in which to help complement Shadowborn Apostle's ability to sacrifice 6 of them and get 1 of them into play. Here are those demons. The first is Taborax, Hope's Demise, a 2/2 flyer for 2 and 1 black mana. Taborax has lifelink as long as it has 5 or more +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever another non-token creature we control dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Taborax. If that creature was a cleric, which at this point in time I will once again slowly shift the card in my hand closer to Jason Tamio as a way in which to showcase that the Shadowborn Apostle is, in fact, a human cleric. So whenever another non-token creature we control dies, if that creature was a cleric, we may draw a card. If we do, we lose 1 life. Do not sleep on the may effect here. Black has very limited number of cards that puts the may ability there to draw a card. If we draw that card, we choose to lose a life. It is not forced on us. This will help us to create a very big, flying, evasive threat, and also will put cards in our hand as long as we choose to do so and have the life to pay for them. Demon number 2 is Harvester of Souls, a 5/5 Death Toucher for 4 and 2 black mana. Whenever another non-token creature dies, we may draw a card. Again, you're seeing a theme here. Our apostles are dying, and we are going to benefit from that. Once they hit the graveyard, an opponent will have the option to pay 3 life, to keep it there, or we bring it back to our hand for it to die again. Demon number 3 is Ob Nixilis the Unshackled, a 4/4 flying trampler for 4 and 2 black mana. Whenever an opponent searches their library, that player sacrifices a creature and loses 10 life. This is a fantastic demon to sacrifice 6 apostles for when an opponent decides to crack that fetch land or cast that demonic tutor or do anything that forces them to search their library. As an additional benefit, whenever another creature dies, we put a +1/+1 counter on Ob Nixilis. This 4/4 flying trampler, similar to Taborax, is going to benefit with a +1/+1 counter each time another creature dies. It doesn't have to be just ours. Speaking of a demonic tutor effect, we have Rune-Scarred Demon, a 6/6 flyer for 5 and 2 black. When it ETBs, we pretty much play demonic tutor, which means we search our library for any card, and we put that right into our hand. Demon number 5 does it a little bit differently. It is Razaketh the Foul-Blooded, an 8/8 flying trampler for 5 and 3 black mana. Here we pay 2 life, we sacrifice another creature, and we search our library for a card, then put it into our hand. Of course, if that is a Shadowborn Apostle, that's even better, because we'll pay the 2 life, we'll sacrifice the creature, we'll target one of our opponents to pay 3 life, and when they don't, we get that creature right back, put it back onto the battlefield, and again, search for a card when we pay 2 life and sacrifice that creature again. And the last of the 6 demons that we have included in the 99 of this Athreos build, it is Vilis, Broker of Blood, an 8/8 flying demon that has mana value of 5 and triple black. We can pay a black mana and pay 2 life, and target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. And whenever we lose life, we will draw that many cards. So, in conjunction with some of the other demons that we've already seen here, or just by itself, Vilis, Broker of Blood can do a lot of card drawing for us as a way in which to maintain tempo, particularly in a deck where 28 creatures have a mana value of just a single black mana. The following cards are considered some alternate win conditions that are included in the deck, that some of which also help to synergize the Athreos Shadowborn Apostle engine from which the deck has been cultivated. The first of those win conditions is Zulaport Cutthroat, a 1/1 human rogue ally for 1 and a black mana. Whenever it or another creature we control dies, each opponent will lose 1 life, and we will gain 1 life. Some of the effects of the aforementioned demons that we've already spoiled during this deck tech cost some life, and Zulaport Cutthroat can help us gain some of that life back when each of our Shadowborn Apostles hits the graveyard. Sir Conrad the Grim. This 5/4 human knight for 3 and 2 black mana is a win condition in and of itself. Whenever another creature dies, or a creature card is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, Sir Conrad the Grim will deal 1 damage to each opponent. So far what we're trying to focus on are effects that are going to take out each opponent at the same time and not something that targets an opponent. We want to hit as many opponents as possible, and Sir Conrad the Grim will do that every single time one of our apostles hits the graveyard. And if we're having trouble doing so, Sir Conrad has a built-in mill effect for 1 and a black mana. Each player will mill the top card of their library. One way or another, if we have Sir Conrad the Grim on our side of the battlefield, the game should be ending very, very soon without any opponent interaction. Taking a different avenue for potential win conditions in this deck, and one that we have the ability to generate just oodles and oodles of mana, as we'll see later on in this deck tech, we are going to include a copy of Exsanguinate. X and 2 black at sorcery speed, each opponent loses X life, and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. This is a great way to bring our opponent's life totals down closer to 0, so that Athreos' pay 3 life ability becomes a little more painful each time one of our opponents decides to do it. Staying on theme with sorceries that are black and cost X and 2 skulls, of course, we have Torment of Hailfire. It is, like I said, X and 2 black. Repeat the following process X times. Each opponent will lose 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. Again, it is another spell that will help bring the opponent's life totals closer to 0, making their choices to pay that 3 life a little more difficult. And that's exactly what we're looking to do. We're looking to find an opponent or opponents who will not pay that 3 life that will allow us to continue to sacrifice our apostles, to continue to get them back into our hand, and rev that engine straight to victory. All right, alternate win condition number 5, Meat Hook Massacre. X and double black. Whenever this ETBs, each creature gets -X until end of turn. We don't even have to put anything for X. We can just pay the 2 black just to have this legendary enchantment on our side of the battlefield. Whenever a creature we control dies, each opponent will lose 1 life. There's that line that we want to continue to stress over and over with these win conditions. Each opponent. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we will gain 1 life. So there will be a little peripheral life gain for us, which will be important because, as we talked about earlier, the aforementioned abilities on some of our demons will cost us some life. And lastly, the last card for this particular subset of the deck tech, our last alternate win condition is Debt to the Deathless. This underloved and underutilized Orzhov sorcery is X, 2 white and 2 black, and each opponent loses 2 times X life. We gain we gain life equal to the life lost this way. In any deck that has black and white, Debt to the Deathless is the better spell over Exsanguinate. Once X hits 6, for both Exsanguinate and Debt to the Deathless, any mana invested into X after 6 makes Debt to the Deathless the more powerful, life-draining option. And those are our alternate win conditions for this Athreos Shadowborn Apostle build. The following cards are considered miscellaneous spells that will help us to enhance and strengthen the deck's overall theme and vision. The first card is Skull Clamp. This equipment costs 1 to cast and 1 to equip. It gives equipped creature +1/-1, and whenever equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. Once more, we will slowly shift Skull Clamp away in order to showcase Shadowborn Apostle's power and toughness. His toughness is 1, so if we slap on Skull Clamp and it's a 1/1, it instantly goes to the graveyard, we draw 2 cards, and we offer up an opponent a tough choice. Runescarred Demon's original target, here it is, the original Runescarred Demon text is right here on Demonic Tutor. 1 and a black at sorcery speed. We search our library for a card, put it right into our hand, best tutor in the format. Let's also play with Demonic Tutor with a little bit of an additional casting cost with Diabolic Intent. Here we have Demonic Tutor all over the place, except we also have to sacrifice a creature as an additional cost to cast the spell. This is just another way to get another Apostle into our graveyard and provide another tough choice for one of our opponents. Next up, we have Teysa Karlov. 2/4 Human Advisor for 2 and Orzhov colors. If a dying creature causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So if we think back to all of those different enchantments and creatures that whenever one of our creatures or a creature hits the graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life and we gain 1 life, Teysa Karlov will double that effect. So every time a Meat Hook Massacre triggers, it's going to trigger a second time if we also have Teysa on our side of the battlefield. And as peripheral information, creature tokens we control have Vigilance and Lifelink, but there are no creature tokens in this deck, so that line of text is not really going to be useful in this Athreos deck. Next, we have Phyrexian Arena, black enchantment, 1 and 2 black. At the beginning of our upkeep, we draw a card and we lose 1 life. So if you think back to the conversation we had when we were showcasing the demons, talking about the importance of you may draw a card, here is one of those cards that forces you to draw the card and lose a life. If you have a self-inflicted death due to Phyrexian Arena story, let me know about that in the comments section below. This is card number 1 after Athreos and our Shadowborn Apostles. That is Phyrexian Altar. It's an artifact for 3. We sacrifice a creature. We add 1 mana of any color. This is what you tutor for to win the game. This is what you want each and every time when you're ready to completely rev the Shadowborn Apostle Athreos engine to its highest capability. You have this out in play with Athreos and with some Shadowborn Apostles. You identify the opponent that will not or is unable to pay the 3 life to keep the Apostle in the graveyard. You sacrifice the Apostle to the Phyrexian Altar for 1 black mana. It comes back to your hand. You cast it again with the black mana that you utilized, and then you just look for one of your alternate win conditions, whether it's going to be Zilliport Cutthroat, Meat Hook Massacre, or whatever else you need. This is card number 1C after you have your Athreos and your Shadowborn Apostles. Next, we have Ashnod's Altar. This is also an artifact with a mana value of 3. We can sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless mana to our mana pool. This is the artifact that was inserted to help out Exsanguinate, to help out Torment of Hailfire, and to help out Debt to the Deathless. Plus, it also acts as a fantastic sacrifice outlet as a way in which to trigger Athreos' "Are you going to pay 3 life to keep this creature in our graveyard?" ability. Few cards left in this subsection. Next up, it is Life Insurance. This Orzhov enchantment is 3, a white and a black, and it has the extort mechanic, meaning that whenever we cast a spell, we can pay a white or black mana as an additional cost to cast that spell, and if we do, we drain the board for 1 life and we gain 1 life. And whenever a non-token creature dies, we will lose 1 life, but we will create a treasure token. So imagine having Life Insurance out on the battlefield with the synergy talked about just a moment ago among Athreos, Shadowborn Apostles, and either your Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar. Next card up, we have Secret Salvage. Mono black sorcery, 3 and 2 black. We're going to exile a non-land card from our graveyard, which is going to be a Shadowborn Apostle. We will then search our library for any number of cards with the same name as that card, reveal them, and put them into our hand. So what we're looking to do here is we're looking to cast this when we know we can comfortably get all of those Apostles onto the battlefield close enough to win the game as we possibly can. We'll exile a Shadowborn Apostle from the graveyard, go through our library, get every other Apostle into our hand. Maybe we already have Edgewalker out there and we can just cast them all for free, or we can get them into play with any other mana source. But Secret Salvage will allow us to get them all into our hand, and then hopefully right onto the battlefield where we'll be able to win the game right there through any of the many engines we've already showcased during this deck tech. And the last card for this subsection of the video, it is Bolas's Citadel, a legendary artifact for 3 and triple black. We may look at the top card of our library at any time. We may play the top card of our library. If we cast a spell this way, we pay life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So this is a way in which we can get Apostles from the top of our library right into play at the cost of 1 life per spell cast if they are the Shadowborn Apostles, because because their mana value was just 1. As an additional, potentially overlooked benefit, we can tap this and sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, and each opponent loses 10 life. So imagine we have 10 Shadowborn Apostles on our side of the battlefield. We tap, sacrifice those 10, each opponent loses 10 life, and then we get to pick one opponent or opponents for each one of those death triggers that Athreos is going to make for each one of those Shadowborn Apostles that went to the graveyard, all 10 of them. It's only going to be a matter of time until their life totals are so small that they either don't pay the 3 life tax for Athreos, or they just look at you with disdain and say, good game. These are our removal and disruption spells, and we're going to start with the best one in the format, Swords to Plowshares. Instant speed, 1 white mana, exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. They're not going to hold on to that life for long, I guarantee it. If that's the best, then this one is very close to it. Path to Exile, instant speed once more for 1 white mana. We exile target creature. We do gift them with a free basic land that they get to search their library and put onto the battlefield tapped. However, not every opponent always can do that. There is such a movement towards playing multicolored and 5-color decks that there have been numerous occasions that I've cast a Path to Exile and the opponent has no basic land to put onto their side of the battlefield. Next removal spell, it's either going to be spot removal or mass removal. If it's spot removal, it's going to be 2 black. We're going to destroy target creature and it can't be regenerated. If it's going to be mass removal, we'll pay 2 and 2 white, and then we'll destroy all creatures and none of them can be regenerated. Spot removal returns with our playmat's namesake. We have Anguished Unmaking, instant speed, white and Orzhov colors. We exile target non-land permanent, and we lose 3 life in doing so. And just for a moment, you can take and revel in the single greatest line of flavor text ever printed on a Magic the Gathering card. All right, next up, we take what Anguished Unmaking can do. We add a generic mana to it, strip away the 3 life lost, and we have Utter End, exile target non-land permanent, 2 and Orzhov colors. Since we're going to be sacrificing so many of our Shadowborn Apostles, let's make sure that they don't get overrun by any of our opponent's big old nasty trampley creatures by including a copy of Grave Pact. This enchantment, 1 and triple black. Whenever a creature we control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. This is going to be a fantastic enchantment and a way in which we can control the battlefield, because let's face it, folks, we are not looking to win the game via combat. This is not a deck that is sculpted for combat. There is not a coat of arms in this deck. We are not looking to send those apostles into combat. So any way that we can manage the battlefield so that we don't have to participate in combat, which is Grave Pact going to allow us to do, is aces in our book. And our last removal spell, it is Farewell. 4 and 2 white, we get to pick 1 or more of the following modes. Exile all artifacts, exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, and exile all graveyards. This spot used to be held by Merciless Eviction, but when Farewell was created, let's be honest, Merciless Eviction became obsolete. And to bring this deck tech to a close, we're going to take a look at the land base. This is a land base that is going to be heavily slated to black because we do not want to lose tempo. We want to make sure that we can cast those Shadowborn Apostles early, often, and throughout the entire game. With that being said, we'll start off with 5 basic planes. There are 5 basic planes in the 99 of this deck. As it is for basic swamps, we have quite a bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 11 basic swamps. So that brings our basic land count up to 16. 5 basic planes, 11 basic swamps, 16 basic lands to start off this portion of the deck tech. And each of the following lands will allow us to tap for one of the colors of mana that we need to cast our spells. Of course, the greatest land in the format, we have Command Tower. That's definitely land number 1. Here we have our Shock land. We'll pay 2 life to have that come into play untapped if needed. Isolated Chapel will come into play untapped as long as we control a plains or a swamp. Vault of Champions will come into play untapped as long as we have 2 or more opponents. Cave of Kolios comes into play untapped anyways, taps for a generic mana, but if we need any mana that has a white or a black symbol in it, it's going to cause us 1 damage. Silent Clearing will come into play. We'll pay 1 life as a way in which to generate a white or black mana, but it also provides the benefit of paying 1, tapping, sacrificing this to draw a card if we need to. Tainted Field will come into play and give us a generic mana, or it will give us a white or black mana as long as we control a swamp. Shattered Sanctum is one of the newer cards to be added to the 99 of this build via an Up and Up series vignette, and this is going to come into play untapped as long as we control 2 or more lands. Fetid Heath is our Orzhov filter land. It'll tap for a colorless, or we can pay 1 Orzhov color, being white or black, tap it, and we can end up getting 2 white, 2 black, or 1 of each. Next up, we have a Shine Shadow Snarl. Now, this is a little bit of a trickier land. It is included because it can tap for a white or a black, but it will ETB tapped unless we show a swamp or plains from our hand when we put it into play. This is a card that you really want to have in your opening hand with any one of our swamps or I almost said islands, with any one of the swamps or plain cards that you have in the deck. And lastly, although this cannot tap for one or other, we have to pick when we play it. Either we're going to put it into play as the Bright Climb Pathway and we can tap it for a white mana, or we decide to flip it and put it into play as Grim Climb Pathway, which will then just tap for a black mana. So this is our Orzhov Pathway. You pick 1 color before it ETBs, and then that's the color you are stuck with. All right, our next bunch of lands are going to be what we can consider our ultra mana generating lands. I don't have any other better way to say it. Big mana lands, I guess that could work too. Let's start with Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. This will help make sure that all of our lands can produce the black mana that we will need to cast our Shadowborn Apostles. And of course, if we're playing with Urborg, we're definitely going to have a copy of Cabal Coffers. Pay 2 generic mana, tap this, and we'll add a black mana to our mana pool for each swamp we control. These 2 lands are a great combination to fuel our Exsanguinate, our Torment of Hailfire, and our Debt to Deathless alternate win conditions. And if we're going to throw Cabal Coffers in there, we might as well throw in Cabal Stronghold. Definitely not as strong as the Coffers, but this can tap for a mana on its own. We're going to need to pay 3 generic mana and tap this in order to activate its Cabal Coffers-like ability. Next land up is Crypt of Agadeem. This will ETB tapped, which generally I disdain. However, the abilities that this card has really trumps the detriment of it coming into play. It will tap for a black mana, or we can pay 2 and tap it to add a black mana to our mana pool for each black creature card in our graveyard. With the potential of having a number of Shadowborn Apostles floating around the depths of our graveyard, including a card like Crypt of Agadeem to get a nice huge burst of black mana, could be the deciding factor in putting us over in a game against our opponents. Next we have Phyrexian Tower. It taps for a colorless, but we can tap and sacrifice one of our apostles there, and we can add 2 black mana. And we can also have it try to trigger Athreos' Death Trigger. Alright, the last few lands we have here, we got 4 left before we can complete the 99. We got some utility lands to talk about. The first is Reliquary Tower. For the purposes of drawing those cards and keeping those cards in our hand, and more importantly, for keeping all of those Shadowborn Apostles in our hands that are going to be necessary in order to keep the Shadowborn Apostle Athreos engine revving up, we want to make sure we have no maximum hand size. We don't want to discard those to the graveyard. They are safer in our hand than they are in the graveyard. Temple of the False God will give us 2 generic mana as long as we have 5 or more lands. And lastly, 2 cards to go. Field of Ruin will tap for a colorless, but we can also pay 2 and sack this to destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls, and then we get to gift each player with searching their library and putting a basic land from their library onto the battlefield. So what this is going to help to prevent, this is going to make sure that there are no troublesome or problematic non-basic lands that are really, really going to tip the scales of the game in an opponent's favor. Think Gaia's Cradle. That could be target number 1 for a Field of Ruin, and is one that I have to always consider in my own metagame. And lastly, our last land of this subsection of the video, our last card of this deck tech, number 99, is West Vale Abbey. We can tap for a colorless. We can tap 5, tap this, pay 1 life to create a 1/1 white and black human cleric creature token, which I don't think we're ever going to do. More importantly, we can pay 5, tap this, and sacrifice 5 Shadowborn Apostles. Sacrifice 5 creatures, because let's face it, we want those Apostles hitting the graveyard, not the tokens. If we're able to do that, not only do we get to trigger Athreos 5 times, but we get to transform West Vale Abbey into Ormondal, the Profane Prince. Here we have a 9/7 flying lifelink indestructible hasty demon that will help us to just win the game so much more quickly, particularly if our opponents have had their lives drained throughout the game before we can transform West Vale Abbey. And there you have it, MTG BC. Athreos, God of Passage, Shadowborn Apostle deck tech. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.